On this episode, we welcome in consultant and speaker Hardy Smith, whose pragmatic and realistic approach ensures that no matter how many steps may be ahead in the growth process, it will always result in readying ourselves to take action. Okay, welcome back into the most recent installment of the GrowthReady Podcast. I am delighted to be welcoming in Hardy Smith today. Hardy, we're going to learn so much about your story, the work that you're doing, and plenty of insights as well around that work as we go. But before we go any further, as I do with everybody now, Hardy, what does it mean to you to be growth ready?
Well, Steve, first, thank you for this opportunity. I've been looking forward to this. I appreciate our connection through the National Speakers Association, and I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you and your audience. And congratulations on the success of GrowthReady Podcast. So this is going to be a whole lot of fun. So to answer the question, what does it mean? It means the lesson I learned from the Boy Scouts, be prepared. And it also lessons I learned from my 30-year career in the world of NASCAR racing. And that's anticipate. That was the greatest lesson I ever got from working directly for Bill France, was Hardy, anticipate. Solve your problems in advance and don't be surprised. So I try to implement those lessons as best I can, right? And be prepared, and being growth ready to me also means, again, from NASCAR racing world, having the antenna up. Yeah. And I know you're a coach. You've got a coaching background, so we share that. Head on a swivel, just always looking, always be looking, and be ready.
I love it. Already. You've given us a little taste of your background, your experience, and I think this is what's going to be really cool just to kind of navigate through this, because we probably spent about maybe 5 or 6 minutes. I think it was at a dinner or lunch, something like that at NSA when we first met, and you gave me what you're doing now and a little bit of what you previously did, and I was like, wow, those are some different worlds right there. So I'm excited to get into that part of it, but immediately diving into your response, being prepared. So people hear something like that and they go, okay, I hear you, Hardy. Let's do the work. Let's get prepared. Let's have a plan. Let's have a strategy, all that kind of thing. But then we have anticipation. Now, anticipation is that thing that typically, and I'd love for you to now elaborate a little bit more. Anticipation is that sort of behavior or skill set, or it's like a special skill. It's a part of your DNA eventually that when you try to describe it to someone, and you try to teach it to someone, it's actually really hard to do because it's your way of anticipating, and it's something that you've evolved and you've been able to learn over time. So I'd love for you just to continue to elaborate on what you mean when it comes to anticipation.
Absolutely, Stephen. What a fantastic question. I think in my case, it's conditioned behavior, and it's the environment that I grew up in. It's the environment, again, of that 30 years in the world of NASCAR racing and the work that I did there. Not a driver, by the way. Most people hear, oh, Hardy, you were in NASCAR racing, and I anticipate the question. No, I'm not wasn't a driver. And that's, Steve, that's when the interest shuts off for some reason. They don't care what I did. Right. But conditioned behavior and just being appreciative, being aware of surroundings, and understanding, developing an appreciation that the environment, if you will, that you operate in, changes and shifts, and there was a whole lot of conversation during the pandemic. From the nonprofit world that I work in, and also the for-profit world as well. We were talking about it in the National Speakers Association among us professional speakers, right? About, oh my goodness, it's change, it's disruption, change and disruption has been a part of our lives, and I say our, I mean collectively, mankind since the beginning of time, right? So there is always going to be, tomorrow is going to be different than today. Today is going to be different than yesterday. And it may be a pandemic. It could be some global conflict. It could be a natural disaster. It could be an economic situation. It could be a personal situation, right? Mm-hmm. And so, change, disruption, that uncertainty, another key word in there, is always a part of our lives. And just, you don't have to just be Chicken Little and think, well, the sky is falling and I'm just going to pull the covers up over my head and just get back in the bed. No, you just know it exists. And what's your workaround? What are you going to do to solve it? And, and so I think having an appreciation for that is really, I don't know, can you develop DNA? I mean, like you start with DNA, but can you like grow some new DNA stuff? I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, well, neither of us are experts in that, so I'm going to stay clear of that question.
Yeah,
but
but it's definitely been a part of my conditioned behavior.
Right.
So that's definitely a part of that.
Yeah, and I love how you're framing that around conditioned behavior. I think that's immediately a term that people can then sit with and say, okay, from a subjective standpoint, I can look through my own lens at how I've conditioned my own behavior, and they can start to maybe look at then how they anticipate what it is they do in their worlds. But within that, though, too, that building of anticipation, yes, we touched on the appreciation, but that awareness for surroundings, too. I mean, shoot, talk about having an awareness for surroundings when you've got cars flying around a track at 150, 160, whatever it is, miles an hour. So just knowing that, hey, this is where someone's awareness for surroundings can really become an asset to them, because if you do become more aware of what's going on around you, your ability to therefore respond accordingly is enhanced. So I'm really hearing that from what you're explaining here, is that it's one thing to create opportunities and walk into rooms and be in the right place at the right time. But if you're not truly present enough to be aware of what's going on around you, how can you actually then respond to the best of your ability as well?
Absolutely right. Don't have blinders. Don't just, shut yourself off. And I tend to be a positive thinker. I tend to be probably way more utopic than I probably need to be, but it's kind of a happy place, right? Yeah. But, you have to have a dose of reality, a dose of being pragmatic. Mm-hmm. That's another lesson from NASCAR world is pragmatism. So you've got to understand the realities of your situation and who and what circumstances are the influencers in your life, in your business, your profession, and again, understanding what those are and just developing the workaround, the plan, the action plan to get after it.
Yeah, I love it. I love exploring that initial answer there, just around being prepared and what it means to you to be able to anticipate. So now I want to, whenever I have someone on who's got a bunch of experience in one world and then this experience in what many would say is a contrasting world, my goal then is to say, okay, folks, we can shift from one world to a completely different world, because there's something within those worlds in terms of how we show up that is somehow consistent. So before we go to what it is you're doing today, and you just alluded to it, some of the non-profit work that you do today, let's go back to those years in NASCAR. Talk to us, Hardy, about the roles and responsibilities that you had in that world.
Well, Steve, thank you for. And how long have we got today? Because I could go on forever and ever about NASCAR.
Yeah. Let's say primary roles and responsibilities.
A lot of great experiences, and I will say. I'm from Talladega, Alabama, and those who follow NASCAR racing understand what that means. That's hometown. And after college, came back home, worked in a small market radio station there that I'd worked at during high school, and got involved in all kinds of community activities, and wound up doing, because of the Speedway being in Talladega, wound up doing sports reporting, network level sports reporting, thanks to the folks at the Speedway. This is pre-ESPN to kind of to date my time here on the planet. And the Speedway was relatively new at that time. and still struggling for publicity. And so the networks, the large Midwestern radio stations, those 50,000 watt Clear Channel stations were alive and well at the time, and they covered a lot of motorsports. And also the radio networks that were big at the time would call the public relations people at the Speedway there in Talladega and say, hey, you know, we can't come cover your race in person, but would you have somebody who might do some correspondent work for us? And the answer was always yes. We got a guy. And the guy was Hardy Smith. And so I was at the Speedway as this young, just fresh out of college, really didn't know a whole lot about NASCAR racing other than I like to watch the races, watch the track be built and all that, Steve. But I was afforded the opportunity. I had a total, I don't know if I should say monopoly, but I had I had it all. So I had all the network business. So I was doing Talladega race reporting for CBS, NBC, ABC, radio networks, UPI, AP audio networks, and all those big Midwestern radio stations that love motorsports. So it was all me. And every report was different. So they didn't get the same thing. So the hustle was on. The hustle was on. And at the same time, Motor Racing Network at that time wasn't nearly as professional and big as it is now. Sure. And they picked up talent, and I say talent very loosely, from race to race. And there were only one or two true talents that traveled every race. But for all the races at Talladega, for about a period of 5 years, I was brought on as the broadcast director. And so imagine this. During the course of a live sporting event, when the caution flags come out of a race that I am directing, the broadcast of the race, when the caution flags come out, Steve, I go outside the control tower and I'm doing Hardy Smith live reports for NBC, Hardy Smith live report for every competitor that MRN's got. Right. But the company was so desirous of publicity, they knew exactly what I was doing and encouraged it. And so I'm getting multiple checks from those events. Eventually, I wound up with an opportunity to work directly at the Speedway itself. Was there for a couple of years, and then they afforded me the opportunity to come to Daytona Beach and work in the corporate operation. All that said, I am this very young kid that the NASCAR family really took me in under their wing and afforded me these opportunities that were just incredible. And so I'm going all over the country. I'm on the company plane with literally the founders of the business and the top corporate executives of the country who were involved in NASCAR racing. Again, I still kind of think I'm that young kid, but maybe I've moved on a little bit, but a lot more here back. But these great opportunities to learn and grow and experience. And I was involved. I was the corporate lobbyist for NASCAR and International Speedway Corporation. Those were sister companies that were the same people. And I worked nationwide, had an office in Washington, D.C. I'm working in every state that has anything to do with motorsports. And I was involved in the building and the ramp up of NASCAR racing back during that time period. So it was a wonderful opportunity, marketing, wonderful opportunity to learn and grow in a multifaceted pronged business.
Yeah, no doubt. And I appreciate you finding a way to articulate 30 years in about 4 minutes. I appreciate that. Because and reason I wanted to get that, I don't always ask our guests to sort of go back and replay, their experience and how they got to where they are or certain, but something as unique as being in as you alluded to, a sport that became a sport in the time that you were there. Like, it wasn't what it is now when you first arrived. And so I always am just, here you are as someone who's growing within something that is growing. And that's really where I'm going with this. Is like, I always run towards those stories. I want to learn more about how you were part of that growth and why you were someone who was able to grow within it. And we just certainly got some examples of that as you went through that. But we also got that little bridge, if you will, now to how you got to where you did in NASCAR, and now you're doing what you're doing. I'm curious, when you look at that time in NASCAR, when did you maybe start to see some of those examples towards, I would assume, the latter years of that time, where it was like, hey, there are talents, there are gifts, there are things that I am able to do in rooms that make sense for me to be doing it maybe, potentially, in other rooms as well?
I really appreciate that question. I get asked that a lot. Hardy, NASCAR to nonprofits. How in the world can you begin to explain that? And for me, it's all been a very natural progression. Everything that I was doing, I had a very short job description during that time period, Steve. It was to anticipate problems that may affect our business, and then deal with those problems and make sure they didn't happen before they did. And then, by some chance, if I was a little bit slow and something slipped through the cracks, I should darn well better get it fixed, and get it fixed in a hurry. So that was pretty much the expectation. Yep. And so it took, again, a lot of awareness. It took a whole lot of willing to learn. I mean, like one quick example, and this is what really helps me with my ability to do what I do in the world of nonprofits, associations, and Chamber of Commerce today. We were during the time period of we were interested in building a new track in the Kansas City market. And we were going back and forth between Kansas and Missouri at the time. Both states were trying to recruit NASCAR to Kansas City. And I was on a corporate plane. I thought it was a day trip. It was a day trip scheduled originally. And Lisa France Kennedy, whose family owns the company, and she's now runs the company, but at the time was executive vice president and kind of on her way to running things. So she was the boss. And so I'm sitting in the back of the plane, and she gives me the signal, Hardy, come up here in just a second. So I sit down, and she said, we just got a call. There's an issue with the legislation that we need to have passed in the Kansas legislature. So I said, okay. And we're going to divert the plane. I don't know where we were going, that day, but I've totally forgot that part of the story. Yeah. But I was dressed the way I dressed leaving Florida that morning with just, a suit and jacket, and that is it. Yeah. So we're going to land in Topeka. You're going to get off the plane. You're going to meet a guy. So it's up to you to figure out who it is. And he's going to give you a situation report. And then you stay in Topeka as long as it takes to get done whatever we need to have done. Got it? Yes, ma'am. I'm good. The plane lands. The snow is starting to fall. It's like winter time, and I've got a suit and a jacket, and I'm on a suit jacket. I'm in a suit. And she said, you get whatever you need to get. Just no question. Just get it, whatever it is. Sure. So all I can tell you is the plane lands. I'm this young guy. I get off the plane. I meet the guy, and explains the situation. I said, okay, well, let's get after it. And all I can say to wrap that story up is the Speedway is in Kansas City, Kansas today. Mm-hmm. And so those kind of things like, oh my gosh, like what is the situation? Be a quick study. Maybe something I have no clue about what the background is. Be a quick study. Come up with strategies that will help make a difference. Get the job done. Mm-hmm. And those experiences like that are way too numerous to share today with our audience. But that's the mindset, and I would say a talent developed over time, that conditioned behavior that I now bring to the world of working with the people I work with today.
Yeah, and fantastic story, and something that few could probably relate to is having a plane plane change course on your behalf. That's unique to say the least. But I will say this, like, as you're telling that story, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, okay, here we are with people who are on their journey of pursuing whatever it is they're pursuing in their world, and at any point, the unpredictable thing happens. Something comes up, and the day has been completely thrown upside down, or the week has been thrown upside down, or that qualification you were about to get is no longer available. Whatever it is, fill in the blank with wherever you find yourself and could potentially find yourself. And what I heard there was just a complete openness to, let's step into the situation first. Let's not just simply find some sort of solution to avoid the situation entirely. Let's actually step into it. Let's step into it willingly, with an open mind, and with a willingness to find the solution in the situation. And I think, like, Hardy, I'm hearing you explain this. I'm like, wow, how many of these moments do we have in our days, in our weeks, in our years, where it's just like, oh man, that doesn't sound like something I want to deal with right now, and we choose not to, and suddenly we find ourselves maybe further frustrated a day, a week, a month from now, because when we had that chance to step into the situation, we refrained and we chose not to, and we found a reason to avoid it. And here you are saying that with that ability to anticipate, to admit that we may not be prepared in the moment, but we can become prepared and therefore anticipate better. It starts with a willingness to step into the situation.
And I totally agree, 100%. And I would suggest this for anyone with a challenge. And sometimes you said something I wanted to step back to, Steve, very critically important. Yeah. Sometimes it's beneficial to lay a situation to the side momentarily, and give yourself a chance to reflect, and give your chance to give pause, settle down, calm down. And that might be 30 minutes. It might be 2 or 3 days. But you have to also, again, have the awareness to know, how long is this situation going to last? How long is the window going to be open for dealing with the situation? Or if left undone, or door not walked through, the situation is going to dictate itself what the results are going to be, and you lose that opportunity. So, but you have to be somewhat good, and it just takes practice at recognizing situations for what they are. And can I take a pause for just a little bit and then get back into it? But how long can you take a pause for? The other part that I really want to emphasize here with this fantastic thought that you've got, Steve, number one, you've got to be willing to ask for help. And that's one of the things that I think I've always prided myself on, is I say I'm willing to admit what I don't know. I'm willing to admit what I'm dumb at, and just ask for help. People like to help. And what I found out, people, and from my mentors along the way, and I've had lots of them, that people are willing to help you if you are willing to do the work. They're not going to do the work for you. Yeah. But if you're willing to do the work, and you're willing to ask, and you're willing to do the work, they will help support you. And, I use this all the time, but the whole 12-step program, that people in self-help situations go through, it's very basic, and it's very 100% on target. You've got to admit you have a problem before we can help you. Yeah. And then along the way, about step 2 or 3, you've got to ask for help. And those thoughts have served me well.
Yeah, that's a fantastic example with the 12-step program. And I appreciate you going back and just underlining and emphasizing some of my initial insight, because the way I would almost want to describe it now is it's that intentionality toward dealing with the situation, not necessarily jumping right into it every single time, but it's enough to be intentional about dealing with it. And maybe the first step in dealing with it is, like you said, putting it to one side for 30 minutes, for 2 days, whatever it needs to be, but not putting it to one side to disregard. And I think
Absolutely.
that is the key piece here. So love that, appreciate that. And let's step more now into what we're doing today and have been doing now for quite a few years, because the non-for-profit space, it is well, I want you to describe in your words what it is about the non-for-profit space that draws a guy like Hardy Smith into it so willingly.
Well, and thank you for the opportunity for that question. And Steve, just for our audience, just to be clear, I'm coming from the place of, let's just kind of set the stage just quickly.
Yes.
The world, there are about 1.5 million, give or take a few, nonprofit organizations in the United States alone.
Wow.
Now that world includes the social service agencies, the healthcare agencies, large nonprofits, small nonprofits, associations, and chambers of commerce. And that's the area that I work in. And my focus, and we know from the National Speakers Association, the advice we get about finding your lane, identifying your niche. Well, my lane is focused on board engagement, helping organizations build positive, productive, and fully engaged boards. Now, why? Well, the reason for that, Steve, is that there are many areas that someone could be involved in, categories providing service and help to advice in the nonprofit world. But why that particular lane? Well, my experience shows me that there are two basic pain points in this world that I'm in. One is they don't have enough money, never enough money. And two, there's a whole lot of frustration around the question, why don't those board members do what they're supposed to do? And maybe a third pain point would be a combination of the two. Why don't board members help us raise any money? Yeah. And so it was a very easy, I knew at some point, and you alluded to this earlier, I knew at some point during my NASCAR career that I would be able to take all of these wonderful opportunities and translate these and those experiences into something that I would be able to, have my own business. And I've been able to do that successfully. And when it was time to leave NASCAR world, I was very gratified because the France family said, Hardy, we think you're going to be thank you for everything you've done for our company. We've been successful thanks with your help. We think you're going to be very successful in your work as a consultant and as a professional speaker. And we believe in you. And just to show you, we'll be your first client. So I was able to walk away in that career transformation and not just jumping blindly, off a cliff. Now, a quick translation, that world to the present day world. In the world of nonprofits, one of the things that world, they don't believe in planning. They say, we're just really too busy doing good, Hardy, to take time out to plan. Well, that's a whole nother program we can get into.
Right. But
I spent 30 years developing and planning for some of the biggest spectator facilities and spectator events on the planet. So I know how to get people involved in planning, and I know how to help develop organizations, and I know how to troubleshoot. I can identify problems, and I look at things from a very pragmatic, very realistic way, and I believe it's beneficial to the organizations that bring me in, Steve, because I'm not a career nonprofit professional. And I don't mean that as a negative to all of my colleagues in the nonprofit world. I just see things differently. And that goes back to that conditioned behavior. I'm trained to challenge. I'm trained to accept but verify. I know you've heard that term in the past. So, and from a professional speaking standpoint, I've been speaking all my life. When I was at Talladega, I was speaking on behalf of the Speedway. When I was at NASCAR, I was speaking on behalf of NASCAR all over the country. So now the only difference is I get to tell stories about those NASCAR days and people pay me, and which I think is great. Yeah. So it all, in my mind, relates very well into the world I'm in. So on the board engagement issue, I developed a quest because I started hearing this question around. I ask an audience, what's your number one problem? And just without fail, it's the board members. Why don't they do what they're supposed to do? In that, I started doing very crude at the time, I've got to admit, very crude research. And I just started asking board members, not professional staff, but board members about, why do you not do what you're supposed to do? Why do you turn off? You were a good board member before. What causes you to turn off or become disengaged? So they started telling me, and I started getting all these golden nuggets that, fast forward and make a long story quicker for you, that became my platform. That's the platform that I speak on, that I train on. That's the subject matter of my book, Stop the Nonprofit Board Blame Game, which is getting a way better response than I thought would ever be possible. But I'm very grateful of the response. And so that's the purpose, very focused. And you mentioned intentionality earlier.
Yep.
That's important. You've got to be intentional about where it is you're going, know your purpose, what is it that you're trying to achieve, and keep that growth mindset open so you are growth ready.
There you go. I mean, you couldn't say it better for a show like this, but at the same time, that principle around your work is applicable in all walks of life. And two things I really want to emphasize here, because we do have these opportunities from time to time on this show to use an example like you, Hardy, of someone who has been in one world that's moved to this other world, as I mentioned earlier, but you found a way to exist in this new world without really changing who it is you are and how it is you show up. In fact, you lent into the notion that your most influential asset can potentially be your lack of experience in this world, your lack of familiarity, because that can almost it can almost pre-diagnose, right? It can assume, it leads to assumption when you just say, hey, if I know this space so well, my mind's immediately going to trigger these biases. It's going to see a situation for how I want to see it, as opposed to really what that situation needs and is telling me right now. I think that's such a powerful insight for anyone listening to this who has that daunting mindset or fear towards making a change or considering showing up in a different world. It actually resonates with me enormously, because here I am as a coach that was once a swim coach, and I'm now coaching executives in engineering companies and financial companies. And it's like, my talent in that room is not in engineering or finances. My talent in that room is my ability, to your point, that conditioned behavior is to bring the best out of people. That's my talent in that room. And you're speaking to your talent in this room. It just happens to be a completely different room to the one that you were in NASCAR.
And that's absolutely right. So I know that then when you're working with a room full of engineers or other professionals, for those laps and those lap sessions and times in the pool and the competition, and you hear the starters gun and you're churning in the water, all that's going through your head and your body and your emotion and your heart, and it's all there. It's the same for me, and like you say, it can be the same for anyone else. So, it's so important to have that intentionality about, just understanding. And I think it's a lifelong journey for all of us. Who are we? Why are we here? What's the purpose? What are we trying to achieve? What makes me happy? And I'm very fortunate. I'm much further down that road today than I was, last week or a few years ago. So it all kind of evolves. And I've been very fortunate that all the parts and pieces that maybe while along the Hardy journey at the time, I didn't quite understand how I was just happy in the moment, pleased in the moment, enjoying success in the moment. I didn't really understand about how those things might relate to a future. But now looking back, I'm thinking, wow, that was pretty good. I wish I would have pre-planned all that, but I don't know if it would have turned out the same.
Right, right, and it speaks to that. It speaks to that desire to just simply be present, right, and be present, be willing to just continually learn as you go. And I think if we're so busy trying to get it right the first time, we're probably not learning, right? And, and so it's just like us giving ourselves that chance to just maybe make a mistake or learn something new. That's how we're going to grow. That's how we're going to get better through this whole process.
Right.
And something else that you mentioned there that I think is such an important point to come back to is the sense of realism as well that you've had within these rooms that you've walked into, these calls that you've taken over the years you've been doing this now, and to be able to speak to the fact that, hey, listen, sometimes the quicker we can just step into the reality of the situation, the more likely we can find the solution the situation requires.
Totally.
And I'm curious, when you do sit down with people and you can sense there's this reluctance or this inability for people to get real, to step into the reality, what might be an approach you take in that situation to help someone maybe step a little bit more comfortably and willingly into that reality?
Well, that's really good. That's a very insightful question, Steve. And I would imagine you face this from time to time yourself in your own practice. There are times when I will, well, every workshop, every presentation, and I'll call them critical conversations with organizations that I know that they need help. Because, and in discovery calls and preparation calls and the background work that you do, just like you in swimming, I doubt seriously you jumped into the pool and just started swimming in a meet, in a competition. There's a whole lot of work that goes into that before you ever are ready to compete. Well, it's the same thing for me. There's that old saying, luck is when hard work and preparation meet. Right. And that's luck. So you create your own, luck. But in my case, I practice doing a whole lot of preparation work. So I understand what the situation is. But I found out through experience it's important not to tell them what I know. My job is to help facilitate them understanding and being really ready to recognize what the situation is themselves, and not, I could say, okay, 5 minutes, I'm going to give you 5 strategies to take, and if you do these, it's all going to work, and we're done. It doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work. And so, but if I can spend the time successfully in getting them to understand where they are, what the situation is, and what they need to do that they come up with themselves, I can guide their thinking. I can facilitate their thinking. I won't say manipulate their thinking, but if I can guide them, then if their solutions are their solutions, they're much more likely to take action on those solutions. And I, in the world of nonprofit strategic planning especially, and again, it's a very dysfunctional situation. They just they understand why it's important, just don't want to do it. It's hard to get board members engaged, but that's a whole nother story. But there's a great quote that I've used for a long time. It's in my book. It's from a good friend of mine, the chancellor of Troy University in Alabama, Dr. Jack Hawkins. And he shared with me, Hardy, if they help bake the cake, they own the cake. So again, if you can help your group that you're working with, whether it's an individual or a group, Steve, if they can help bake the cake, they'll own the cake. So that's one of the important tactics that I take, if you will.
Yeah, I love a good saying like that. That's really powerful and speaks to everything that you're mentioning here. And a couple things that really just came through there is this notion of maybe asking yourself once in a while, because obviously here you are, people are acquiring your services to do what I'm about to say. But I think as people, we can do a better job sometimes of considering, are we surrounding ourselves with people that are trying to facilitate a little bit more as opposed to telling us what to do. I think we need those people in both worlds, right? We need, from time to time, we do need someone to, I mean, my wife's fantastic at that. Let's give her props. She's wonderful at telling me what to do, and I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change her for the world. But the fact of the matter is, like, we need one or two folks as well that are willing to say, hey, listen, in this case, I'm actually not going to tell you what to do, but what I want to do is I want to meet you in the situation. I want to speak with you, because this is the second part of this too, is that from that reality, by getting you more into it, more connected with it, as you mentioned there in that awesome saying as well, like, how can I help you get ownership? Because we want them to take action that they want to take when we get to the end of this, right? We don't want them to feel begrudgingly as though they're having to take action. We want them to actually own it in a way where they want to take action. And that's when lasting growth and lasting change, something that we talked about all at the beginning now, that's when the likelihood of that is going to continue far beyond when we've left the room.
And I would suggest too, you know, we talk about being growth ready as individuals. You've got to have that same conversation with yourself.
That's right.
And you've got to come up, okay, what are my solutions? What can I commit to? What is my individual, organizational, personal capacity for taking the action that I want to take? And what's a goal? And then maybe a little bit of a stretch goal on top of that. And are you holding yourself accountable? How are you, what is success to you as an individual? And how are you holding yourself accountable? And are you on track? And do you need to step back and evaluate where you are? And all of those things are so important. And for anyone who's wanting to be growth ready and take advantage of the possibilities that their experiences and their talents and their desires represent, these are all keys that will help you get there.
I love it. Love it. I always appreciate it when our guests are able to bring it back squarely on the individual, because for me, and I know you know this as you just alluded to it, but all this individual and professional and personal growth that we want in our worlds starts and ends with that person looking at us in the mirror every morning. Can we take that ownership from the beginning of the day, when we take our head off the pillow, to the end of the day when we put our head on the pillow? If we can do those sort of things to begin with, folks, the likelihood of all these other pieces, the more complicated pieces, the pieces that are more out of our control, we're gonna somehow find a way to do better with those through this process and through this journey as well. Hardy, this has been an absolute delight. But before I let you go, brother, you referenced the book, Stop the Nonprofit Board Blame Game. It is an award-winning book at this point. Yes. Before I let you go, I'm going to let you just tell people where we can learn more about you, the book, and all this kind of thing. But whenever someone suggests what you just suggested there, that the book has really been more than you could have ever imagined, tell me, what has been that biggest surprise? What's been that thing that's just kind of blown you away when you look at the results that's come from this book?
Well, when I started, I alluded to that research and doing, trying on a quest to find an answer to this very compelling question that affects over 1.5 million organizations in this country. And think about how many professional people 1.5 million organizations represents, and think about how many volunteer board members 1.5 million organizations represent. So if you can do whatever that math is, that's a big number.
A lot of people.
That's a lot of frustration, and that's a lot of angst that I'm trying to help a whole lot of people feel better. But when I started the quest, Steve, I didn't have the idea of a book in mind. Yeah. I was just on this quest. And then you know how it is in National Speakers Association, where you got to have a book, So I started thinking, and I was already writing, and so there was a whole lot of the content that was there, and it's, okay, well, I think a book, that just makes a whole lot of sense. So, I think fast forward, it was a tremendous learning journey, an opportunity to go deep into my quest and better prepare me for the work that I do. The thing that's different about the book it's based on the board member perspective. It's not just another book, and all due respect to all of my colleagues and fellow authors who have written wonderful books, but they tend to be from the staff member perspective. My book is based on the board member perspective, and then I share the how-to stories. I don't focus on, hey, you got a problem. I focus on why the problem exists, and then what can you do about it. And then I was able to weave in a whole lot of what I call Hardy stories to kind of humanize the book a little bit, so it's not just a dry book. There's a little bit of entertainment to it, so that made it a really fun project. And again, I'm very grateful that it's having the impact that it has. I just shipped off another couple of boxes of books yesterday for an organization I'll be working with in a couple of weeks. And it's been very, very grateful. Very, very grateful at the results.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's wonderful. And as a new board member myself, I became a board member of a local non-for-profit here in Baton Rouge in the last few months. We're gonna have to do a book swap so I can start educating myself a little bit on how I do things. But Hardy, listen, this has been a pleasure. I've appreciated the Hardy stories that you've been willing to share with us throughout our 45 minutes. Before I let you go, where can we learn more about you? Maybe how can we get a copy of the book? All those sort of things. Let our audience know.
I'll make it really easy. Thank you for that opportunity to share that information. HardySmith.com.
Very simple. That's it, folks. And that'll be right. That'll be in the show notes. You'll be able to go there. I've been to the website myself, and it is as simple as that. Just head to the website, and you'll learn everything you need to know about Hardy, how you can access the book, all those sort of things. Listen, man, it's been long overdue, and I'm glad we've been able to do this. Really enjoyed having you on, and just best of luck with your quest as you continue on your quest of making this impact on so many organizations and so many people on the road.
Steve, thank you so very much. I appreciate the opportunity that National Speakers Association has afforded for us to get introduced, and now this opportunity for us to develop more of a relationship. I look forward to continuing the conversations and look forward to watching your continued success as well. And thanks for everyone who listened in on the podcast today. Thank you.
Thanks, Hardy. And my thanks to Hardy for joining us on the show today. Truly appreciated the stories, and I really enjoy it when I get to bring someone on that can take us back in time and show us how they were individually growing through the growth of something we take for granted today. If you're based in the U.S., you know NASCAR like most sports, but clearly there was a time when NASCAR was not what it is now, and Hardy played a huge role in allowing it to become what it is today. Something I really want to challenge with you all as we close. Typically, I ask you to focus on something more internally and focus on yourself. And I want you to think more about external influence based on something that we got into there towards the end. And this notion of, are you surrounding yourself with people that are willing to facilitate your growth? And it's really key to make sure you've got one or two. You know, just to make this more of a recommendation than as opposed to just food for thought. If everyone in your world is one of two things, in the sense of either they're just telling you what to do or they've no interest, then it's tricky for you to ever develop your own capacity to learn and grow. And to the insight that Hardy provided from the very beginning, it's very difficult to build an ability to anticipate and learn as you go if you're constantly either being told or being ignored, right? So how can we find people that want to step in with curiosity, that want to ask questions in service of helping and steering our growth journey? How can we find those kind of people that when we ask them for time with us, that they are going to not only say yes, but they're not going to come in with some sort of preconceived notion of what they need to say and how they need to do it. Not everybody in your life needs to be that, but you need one or two. You need one or two that are going to try to challenge you in a way so you learn that you take ownership, as Hardy mentioned, taking that ownership in the process so that you come out the other side of that experience with an action or two that you truly want to insert. Can you find those kind of people in your world? hey, if you have one or two of them already that you're aware of, can you be visiting them more? Can you be using what it is they do for you more consistently to see more consistent growth? So just something to think about there as we close in this episode. And again, so wonderful just to learn through Hardy's experiences, some powerful insights along the way as well to help you get growth ready in your world. Make sure, folks, that we are subscribing to the show, that we're sharing episodes like this with folks that can stand to learn something new and be impacted differently in a unique capacity through a conversation like this. And with anything else when it comes to your quest, as Hardy likes to talk about his quest, when it comes to your quest, I wish you nothing but the best of luck in pursuit of all growth that you're trying to achieve. Bye for now.